What is up, my Shadowverse soldiers, and welcome back to another Shadowverse Evolve video. Alrighty, and soldiers, sorry about that little brief of absence. I had to leave out of town that last week, so I wasn't able to get this video out in time for me leaving. But I am very excited to talk about today's video, and that is going to be Runecraft, which is my favorite class. So I'm not going to do too much of a breakdown on how I like Runecraft and everything. We'll be doing that once we get into these different classes. And of course, we're going to be getting a word from our sponsor and everything and knocking out how these new triggers work. Alright, so I discovered this website, Showdown. So this is a pretty good place that you can also make your deck lists and everything like that. You can explore decks, you can build decks, and you browse all the cards. It's a pretty good layout, I'm going to be honest with you. There's going to be a nice little partner collaboration thing that's going to be going on. So for any Shadowverse Evolve content creators that want to be on this website and you want some good traction, I think this is a good place to look towards. But yeah, I believe this hub is a pretty good place to look into towards making decks, because personally, in my experience for Bushy Navi, I do enjoy making the decks, but you know, building a perfect deck with everything laid out and you're just looking at the entire deck instead of like, you know, flipping from page to page like we usually do in Bushy Navi. I like the kind of layout where you can just have your leaders and all your cards here, and then you can see the layout. Like I can maybe potentially take out one of Orcus. I won't actually be taking out a full playset of Orcus, because be serious. But, you know, if I want to have at least, you know, maybe like 2 Orcuses, I can look at that ratios and then have, you know, some test sample hands here too. So I think that's a pretty cool feature on this website. And they also have a Discord community, so you can report any bugs or fixes if you want to really look into that. But outside of that, join the Discord community if you are willing to give a shout out for a new Shadowverse like Evolve card deck building, kind of like community gathering place too. So I think this is a very nice hub. This is a very wonderful idea to be putting into the Shadowverse Evolve community right now, because we're going to be, after this little bit of decline, I will say we will be on the come up coming into these next couple of months. But yeah, I'll put a link in the description below for you guys to check out the website, and you know, feel free to look at it if you want to. I'll put a link down in the description below, and we'll get back to the rest of the video. All right, but getting into business, so we have new keywords or new terminologies. I'm not exactly sure what to put them here. I just said that these are triggers, and triggers are going to be the new things that's going to be happening for Cardfight Vanguard. And like I said earlier, that I don't think they explained everything that they did. If you are a Vanguard player and you already know what these triggers are, of course they're going to be different for Shadowverse Evolve. So I went ahead and made a good example of all of these triggers, and they're color coded too to what the cards are going to look like. Of course, they're going to have the translations under the bottom of the cards, but let's go ahead and figure what these triggers are. All right, so starting off first, only trigger cards with the same class as your leader can be put into your deck, and there are 4 types of triggers. So we have the critical trigger, the draw trigger, the stand trigger, and the heal trigger. So the critical trigger gives your follower on your field +2 attack. The draw trigger lets you draw a card, and then the stand trigger refreshes a follower on your field, but this turn that follower can't attack enemy leaders if it already did. And then heal trigger gives your leader +3 defense. So a very interesting, you know, kind of like fusion here. So now we have our own little translation here for triggers from Vanguard into Shadowverse Evolve. All right, and then we have our next keyword. We have drive. So drive is a little bit of, I would say it's a little confusing in a way. So I'll try my best to go as slow as I can and try my best to explain it as best as possible. And of course, if anybody has any questions, drop them down below in the comments below, and I'll try my best to answer them in the comments and stuff like that. But we have the keyword drive. So followers with drive have rush and single drive. All right, so we have single drive. So followers with single drive have a strike ability. So strike, you perform a drive check once. So going over the information we already have now. So followers with drive have the rush, so they're able to trigger the single drive ability as they're already played. All right, so then we have drive check. So to perform drive check, you flip up the top card of your deck. If a trigger card is flipped up and your deck is a Cardfight Vanguard deck, you can activate the trigger ability of the flipped card. If the trigger ability is successfully activated, you put the flipped card into your cemetery, and if the trigger ability failed to activate or flipped card isn't a trigger card, you put the flipped card to the bottom of your deck. So essentially, followers with drive have the rush and single drive, which allows you to do the drive check, and you're able to look at the top card of your deck. If it's one of the drive check trigger cards that we were just talking about, then we're able to activate it, and then it goes straight to the cemetery. And if it's not a trigger card, or if the trigger is able to fail due to other effects or anything like that, you put that card right to the bottom of your deck. Alrighty, next up we have twin drive. So followers with twin drive have the strike ability to perform drive check twice. All right, so being able to do 2 drive checks is pretty nice, but then we have the on drive effect. So on drive is effects that activate when a follower is given drive. All right, soldiers, so a little summary of everything we've learned here so far. So followers with drive have the rush and single drive, and you're able to do drive check once as long as you have the single drive, and then it will specify if you're able to have the twin drive to be able to do drive check twice. We know that drive check is going to be flipping the top card of our deck and putting it into the cemetery if it's a trigger card that was able to activate. And if it didn't activate or wasn't a trigger card, it goes right to the bottom. And then the on drive is going to be the way you essentially like evolve your followers. Just kind of like a good comparison to get everyone on the same page is how the on race ability worked for the Uma Musume set. All right, so we have the keywords ride. So followers with ride can be given drive by paying the cost and putting a drive point card from your evolve deck under the follower. Followers with drive have single drive and rush, and you may use an evolution point to pay 1 play point for the ride cost. Followers with drive can't get another drive. So another good example, so this is race. You know, when you race a follower, you feed them a carrot, you're able to do, you know, whatever on evolve or racing effect that that follower needs to do. But in Vanguard, you're going to be using the ride mechanic. So using it to ride a follower, and then you're able to drive it, and then you know what happens when a follower gets drive, has the single drive and then rush. All right, so we are going to have starter amulets in this set as well, and starter amulets in the Vanguard deck. So you must have at least one copy of a starter amulet in your card deck. You may only have one type of the starter amulet in your deck, and it must be placed face down on your field before the game begins, and then you turn it face up at the start of the game. All right, and the starter amulet is really supposed to emulate the grade 0 that's in Vanguard. I've only played Vanguard a handful of times, so you know, have some mercy on me on some of the effects and the terminology for Vanguard here. But the starter amulet is a good emulation for how they have a grade 0 in Vanguard. All right, so to most likely save time, I'm probably going to reuse these things. So these are going to be in between each and every video. So thank you so much for watching. We're going to go ahead and get into the reveals now. So hope you all enjoy the reveals. All right, so appreciate everybody for listening there. If you skipped around, you know, that's fine too, because I've put these on every single video so everybody knows how Vanguard's going to work, because they didn't really talk about triggers too much and how they worked in Shadowverse Evolve. But today we are going to be talking about Pale Moon. All right, so the lowdown on Pale Moon, it's the magical circus of which headquarters is located in the Dark Zone, and that's the nation of mysteries and magic. All right, so for the playstyle of Pale Moon is that they primarily focus on calling up rear guards from the soul. All right, and soldiers, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not 100% up to terms on terminology when it comes to Vanguard, but I am going to assume that you're going to be playing followers outside of your deck and from your hand. All right, so we have our first card, and pardon my French if I mess up this card name. So we have Silver Thorn Dragon Tamer Laqueer. So she's a 7-cost 5/5. She has Rush and Twin Drive, so she can drive check twice. But when she comes into play, Fanfare, select up to one of each Pale Moon follower that costs 4 play points or less, Pale Moon followers that cost 3 play points or less, and a Pale Moon follower that costs 2 play points or less into your banished area and put them onto your field. Alright, so a nice little demonstration of what we were just talking about. So it looks like we're going to be using the banished area to get other followers that we probably use by banishing from other effects to go ahead and put them onto the field with this Fanfare effect. Alright, next up we have Nightmare Doll Alice. So she's a 3-cost 3/3. You can evolve her for 1, and she has Twin Drive, so she does the drive check twice. But when she comes in the field, you banish the top card of your deck. If there are at least 5 cards in your banished area, you draw a card. Who needs cards when we're going to be playing cards out of our banished area? So going ahead and starting on turn 3 with banishing the top card of our deck. Hopefully there's going to be smaller cards that are going to be able to generate a way of how we can just go ahead and control what we banish on the top of our deck, so it can be an optimal target for our 7-cost. Would be really optimal and helpful. Alright, so next up we have Nightmare Doll Alice Evolve. So she turns into a 4/4 and she still has Twin Drive, but on Evolve you choose one of the following. You can either 1, select a Pale Moon follower in your banished area that costs 2 or less play points and put it onto your field, or 2, you can spend the extra 4 play points. You can select a Pale Moon follower in your banished area and put it onto your field. Alright, so the fact that this follower has multiple abilities in terms of this. So we can spend a total of 4 to select a Pale Moon follower so we can get a 2-for-1 special. And then that Pale Moon follower gets their Fanfare effects going off too. Or we can spend a total of 9. I think the correct number is 9 here, because we do have to pay the 3 for the regular Alice. Then we evolve, and then we have to spend the 4 play points to select any Pale Moon follower that's in our banished area and putting it onto a field, and then their Fanfare effects get to go off. Alright, next up we have Purple Trapeza. So she's a 2-cost 2/3. Fanfare, you choose one of the following. You can either 1, draw a card, then banish a card in your hand, or 2, select a Pale Moon follower on your field. If there are at least 5 cards in your banished area, give it Storm. Alright, so it looks like this is going to be the 2-cost card that we're going to be optimally looking to play for free when going for the, hey, get a 2-cost card out of your banished area. So putting this into the banished area and getting the fanfare of either choosing 2 of these nice abilities, just either plussing a card into your hand, or giving another Pale Moon Follower Storm so you can swing in for some good damage. Alright, next up we have Crimson Beast Tamer. So she's a 4-cost 3/3. You can evolve her for 1 into a Barking Manticore. She has Ward, but when she comes into play, you banish a Pale Moon card in your hand and then you draw 2 cards. Alright, so I'm gonna be honest, I had a big grin on my face when I saw that this card drew 2 cards, just because I absolutely love Rune cards that say just +2 in a way. Just being able to banish a Pale Moon follower to go ahead and have a target to be able to play in the later game is very helpful, while also plussing in and digging through your deck a little bit. Alright, and then we're looking at the evolved form. So we have Barking Manticore. So it's a 4/4, it has Ward and Twin Drive, so it's able to drive check twice. But on evolve, you select the enemy follower on the field and deal it 4 damage. Alright, so mind you that the Crimson Beast Tamer is one of the cards that you're able to play off of the Dragon Tamer, which will be for free from the banished area for paying the 7. But being able to evolve in that same turn to deal 4 damage is something to, get past the ward. And then using the Barking Manticore, that might also help for swing a total of 8. Because we do have followers that are really big wards when we go against certain matchups. So it is very helpful, and being able to drive check twice, and then another 2 times if we're in the big turn with the Dragon Tamer is very helpful. Alrighty, next up we have Mistress Hurricane, which is 2-cost 3/2. When she comes into play, if there are at least 5 cards in your banished area, give this follower Storm, and you can also activate to engage this card and banish this card. You can select an enemy follower on the field and deal it 3 damage. Alright, so this card is very helpful, so it's going to be putting itself into the banished area to deal 3 damage to another follower, and then if your opponent doesn't have any followers on the field and you're in a pretty good spot and you have those 5 cards in the banished area, this follower has Storm, so you can swing in for good 3 damage, and then keep going with your play lines. Alrighty, and then next we have Golden Beast Tamer, so she's a 4-cost 4/4. When she comes into play, you select a Pale Moon follower in your banished area that costs 2 or less play points and put it onto your field. You can also activate to engage this card, and you can select the enemy follower on the field and deal it X damage. X equals the number of Pale Moon followers on your field. Alright, so into this card's effects. So being able to play a 2-for-1 is always very good, because you're going to get those fanfare effects for the other follower that you're going to be playing, or whatever the follower is going to be doing, it can go ahead and be done as long as it's on the field. But you can also activate to engage this card to at least deal 2 damage to something on the field, which can be very nice, but I personally don't like these cards because I do remember with the older Rune deck, I can't think of the name of it on the top of my head, but I know it was like deal X damage to however many like cards were in your EX area, and it was like, okay, well, I'm optimally going to have at least 2 or 3, and whenever I go for cards like this, when there's like 4 play points on the line, those followers are looking like they have 5 defense, because we're pretty deep into Shadowverse Evolve, I'd like to say. So those followers having 5 defense, if I don't have 5 cards in my EX area, or at least like 4, and then me being able to use this 2-cost follower to either swing into it or do the extra damage, then it's going to be pretty awkward. But hopefully we're able to have at least a decent amount of cards in our EX area, or excuse me, not in the EX area, on the field, to be able to do some real damage to a follower on the field. Alright, next up we have Starlight Melody Tamer Pharaoh, so she's a 3-cost 3/3. You can ride her for 1, but on drive you give this follower +1/+1. And if you have at least 5 cards in your banished area, you select the enemy follower on the field and destroy it, and then you give your leader +2 defense. Alright, so I like this card a lot. So not only do we get a 4-cost 4/4 if we're able to do the ride on the same turn, we can make sure to have that check of those 5 cards in the banished area, which, let's be serious, if we're going to ride it, why are we not having the 5 cards in this banished area? But also healing our leader too, and then removing any enemy follower on the field as long as they don't have the aura or anything. It's just very good for hard removal. Alright, next up we have Turquoise Beast Tamer, so it's a 2-cost 2/2. You can ride this follower for 1, but on drive you select the enemy follower on the field and deal it 2 damage, and you give this follower +1/+1, then you banish the top card of your deck. So some early game buff in a way. So not only are we going to be spending 2 and then evolving so we can go ahead and deal 2 damage to an enemy follower, just in case if our opponent's playing low to the ground, we can take care of 2 followers in a way. And then we're able to go ahead and do our game plan by getting rid of the top card of our deck, putting it in our banish area, so we can hit those 5 cards very quickly. Alright, next up we have Dark Metal Bicorn, so it's a 1-cost 2/2. You can activate to engage this card, you can draw a card, and then banish a card in your hand. So it's nice that we have a 1-cost Goblin here, so just in case that your opponent doesn't have anything on turn 1, we can either keep engaging this card to keep banishing cards so we can hit that 5 very quickly, or we can swing in for some damage. Alrighty, next up we have Nitro Juggler, so he's a 3-cost 4/4, and while there are at least 5 cards in your banished area, this follower has Bane and Ward. But when it comes into play, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, you banish 2 cards from among them and put the remaining cards at the bottom of your deck in any order. Alright, so it looks like the turn 1s are going to be pretty simple here. So on turn 1, we're going to want to play the Bicorn, go ahead and draw a card, and then put whatever card that we want into the banished area, or it might be vice versa. Excuse me if I don't remember all the way. Then turn 2, we're going to want to use a follower that's going to put another banished card from the top of our deck into the banished area. Then optimally on turn 3, we really want to hit this Nightgrove Juggler, just because we're able to look at the top 5 and banish any 2 followers that are optimally going to be in there, and just have some good generation being in the banished area, and then played from there to go ahead and put that into the banished area. That's a confirmed spot. And then when we go to banish, or excuse me, to play a card from a banished area from one of our other followers' effects, we have the resources there. But looking at the next card, we have Midnight Bunny. So she's a 2-cost 2/2. You can ride her for 1. But on drive, you give this follower +1/+1. Then you reveal the top 2 cards of your deck, reveal and add one of them to your hand and put the other into your banished area. Alright, so for a total of 3 play points, we're able to get a 3/3 on the field. Unfortunately, no drive check here, but we're able to just go ahead and reveal the top 2 cards. Any of the Pale Moon followers that we go ahead and need to put into the banished area, just throw into there, and then any follower that we're going to need to get any follower out of the banished area, we're just going to add to our hand. So hopefully it can work out in that situation whenever you look at the top 2, but you optimally want to go for the thing that you really want to play on Fanfare, that will really get you a card out of the banished area. Alrighty, next up we have Hades Hypnosis. So it's a 1-cost quick, so you can choose one of the following. You can either 1, select the enemy following field and deal it 2 damage, or 2, discard a Pale Moon card and then you select the enemy following field and deal it 3 damage, banish the top 3 cards of your deck. Alright, so I was looking at that second effect, and I know I've been looking forward to this 1-cost quick for the Pale Moon so far, because I honestly thought it was going to say banish a Pale Moon card, then select the enemy following field, deal it 3 damage, and then, you know, maybe banish the top 2 cards. But you discard a Pale Moon card, and you're actually able to banish the top 3, which is very helpful, especially as early as turn 1, in case you want to match your opponent's freak or answer their small bodies on the field in case they're playing a little aggressive, which can indeed happen. But we're not really focused on the fact that we have a snipe for Rune, because Rune always gets a snipe. So just having this in the set and, you know, spending 1 to deal 2 damage is cool and everything. But if you're able to discard a Pale Moon card and you're playing the Pale Moon deck in terms of Rune things, I think it's going to be very helpful. You go for the second effect. And then next up we have Dynamite Juggler. So it's a 2-cost 2/3. When it comes into play, you banish the top card of your deck. Then if you have at least 5 or more cards in your banished area, deal 2 damage to each enemy leader. And this card also has the critical trigger. So when this card is flipped by a drive check, you give a follower on your field +2 attack. Alright, personally, what I'm really enjoying from this card, it's able to do 2 in a way. So it's a 2-cost. Of course, you can play him in the early game to go ahead and banish the top card. If you're in the other game, you're not going to have those 5 or more cards. So do you really want to do this Fanfare? But you are going to be missing out on the critical trigger, excuse me. But in every way, it's doing 2. So if you have the 5 or more banished cards in the banished area, you could deal 2 damage to the enemy leader. If you leave this on field and it's stale, then it can still deal 2 damage in a way. But if you flip it off the critical trigger and we do hit a Storm follower, which we can from other effects from other followers that we looked at, we can do that extra 2 damage to possibly swing in for more damage. Alrighty, next up we have Rainbow Magician. So he's a 2-cost 3/2, and when it comes into play, you select a Pale Moon follower in your banished area and add it to your hand. You can banish the top card of your deck. And this card also has the draw trigger, so when this card is flipped by a drive check, you draw a card. Alright, soldiers, we can't control whenever we banish the top card of our deck. We never know sometimes whenever we're going to banish maybe a key piece. So Rainbow Magician is going to be our way for whenever we're banishing top 2, top 1, and there's a card that we really want out of our banish area, we can go ahead and get, like our boss monster, like the Dragon Tamer, which we're optimally going to want to get every time. Because if we manage to banish that card, this is going to be the way we get it back. Alright, next up we have Sky High Walker. So it's a 1-cost 1/2. You can activate by banishing this card. You can select a Pale Moon follower in your field and refresh it. For the rest of this turn, it can attack enemy leaders. And this card also has the stand trigger, so when this card is flipped by a drive check, you select a follower in your field and refresh it, and for the rest of this turn, it can attack enemy leaders. So like I've said before in many of the other videos, if any of you soldiers have been, you know, constantly watching, which I do appreciate, and if you are new, welcome. But these stand cards just are not very good. So it's nice that we're able to put a card into the banish area just for spending 1. But I know we're going to need to use the stand trigger to really get some really good removal in that turn. But if there was like a stand trigger where this follower doesn't like take like as much damage and then we keep swinging to other followers, it's nice to reserve a follower that you don't want it to be attacked into. Very, very helpful. But I do think that the stain trigger, out of all the triggers that are revealed for Vanguard, I think this has to be the bottom. Alrighty, next up we have Candy Clown. So it's a 2 cost 1/3. It has Ward, but when it comes into play, give your leader +2 defense and you banish the top card of your deck. And this card also has the heal trigger, so when this card is flipped by a drive check, you give your leader +3 defense. Alright, so one thing personally that I'm looking forward to for this Vanguard set here is that when we're swinging with our big followers and just other followers that have the single drive and this twin drive and everything like that, is that when we swing with these cards, we're going to be flipping the top card of our deck, and we're going to be hitting triggers. Like, people are going to be healing 3, someone's going to be drawing a card, and sometimes the follower that you're going to be swinging with, if it's swinging for 5 damage and you're at 7, you hit that critical and it's like, okay, well now I have lethal coming towards me. What can I do? Alrighty, next up we have Jumping Jill. So she's a 1 cost 2/2, and you can ride her for 3, but on drive you select the Pale Moon card in your banished area and put it into your hand. You give this follower +1/+1, but when she comes into play, you banish the top 2 cards of your deck. Alright, so it looks like you're going to be wanting to add Jumping Jill, or at least you're going to be wanting to start your turn with at least Jumping Jill, so you can start the game with 2 cards into your banished area. But if you manage to get this ride 3 by selecting any Pale Moon card, mind you card, not follower, and adding it to your hand to make this follower a 3/3 is pretty cool too. Alrighty, next up we have Skull Juggler. So it's a 1 cost spell, so you can select 2 Pale Moon cards in your cemetery and banish them and then draw a card. This card cannot be played if you don't have 2 Pale Moon cards in your cemetery to banish. Alright, so very helpful. We're going to turn cards into our cemetery into ways to just, promote our game plan. So, of course, with the quick spell that we were talking about, we had to discard a Pale Moon card to go ahead and deal 3 damage and then put the top 3. Well, we can go ahead and get that 5 by using Skull Juggler in that very next turn, by going ahead and getting rid of those 2 Pale Moon cards, putting them into our banished area, and then we get the +1 card. Alrighty, soldiers, and lastly we have Girl Who Crossed the Gap. So it's a 2 cost amulet, and it's a starter amulet. So you can activate to engage this card and put this card into your cemetery, you draw a card, then you banish a card in your hand. This ability can only be activated if there's a Pale Moon follower on your field. Alright, so we have the grade 0 for the deck. So if we're going to be focusing on Pale Moon stuff, this is going to be the amulet that's going to be face down at the beginning of the game. You flip it over, you're able to go ahead and do this as soon as you play like a Jumping Jill or something, which is going to be the optimal turn 1. You're already going to have 3 cards into the banished area, then you need those 2 more, and you'll already be at your 5, but of course we're going to be taking cards out of the banished card area, and then adding more, so there's going to be a lot of cycling going on through there. But this is going to be the grade 0, which will optimally get you those 3 cards in the banished area, as long as you have the Jumping Jill turn 1. Alright, and then we have our alternate art. We have our UR for Pale Moon / Runecraft for Vanguard, and it looks pretty nice, I'm not going to lie to you. So I don't know how popular Pale Moon is going to be come around in this meta, but by the time we get to the end of next week, which we're going to be doing all the breakdowns, I'm going to be excited to be talking about everything else. But, that's going to be towards the future. But in terms of this card, I hope everyone's going to be acquiring it if they want it for their decks. And if anyone that's going to be playing Pale Moon, then, let me know how your success is, because I'm going to be looking forward to playing this deck. I'm excited for this deck to be in my hands and be playing it. So I hope you all have some good success with it. Alrighty, soldiers, and that is it for the reveals. Of course, I'm sorry again, which I will apologize for missing the last half of the week there in terms of reveals, but of course we're going to be knocking everything out. We have Dragon next, and then we have neutrals, and then of course we have to talk about the starters, which will be probably up until Wednesday, and then maybe Thursday we'll talk about everything that happened in the conference, which I still need to catch up on personally because, like I said, I was out of town. So I wanted to make sure I got these reveals out to you before we have our set Friday, which I'm so excited for it to be in everybody's hands. But alright, soldiers, that is it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure you are all safe in whatever you do tonight and safe whatever you do for the rest of the year. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. I love you all, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Yeah. TRINN. Just to get you away. What I got to do, what I got to do.